Have you ever heard the name Thoth? Perhaps not, yet his voice still speaks to you. While all the deities of ancient Egypt have faded into the dust of time, only one has survived, not carved in stone, but imprinted in the consciousness of man. He has passed through empires, religions, wars, reaching us under many names: Hermes, Trismegistus, Enoch, Idris, always the same, always ready to awaken those who seek the truth beyond illusion. Thoth was not the god of the sun, of battle, or of the underworld. He was and remains divine thought itself, the mind that shapes the universe, the voice that makes itself heard when all other sounds are silent. And when you begin to seek true wisdom, it is he who answers. Now stop and ask yourself, did you stumble upon him by chance today? Or perhaps deep down, your soul was already prepared to listen to his message. The mind that grasps the truth becomes light for the spirit. And when this light is turned on, everything around it is transfigured. If you believe that time is a simple succession of days, months, and years, then you have not yet understood what the ancients guarded. Before continuing, leave a like. Why? Because that seemingly simple gesture is the first word of an initiatory dialogue. When you do it, I recognize in you the seekers of true knowledge, and together we will lift the veil. The Egyptians did not see time as a simple indicator of past, present, and future. To them, time was a living force, a sacred energy that had to be respected, measured, harmonized. And no one understood this force better than Thoth. He did not simply observe time, he literally wrote it. Thoth was the cosmic scribe, the one who, with a divine quill, traced the cycles of the moon, the flow of the seasons, the order of the years, and the rhythm of civilizations onto the invisible fabric of existence. He was the one who created the Egyptian calendar, but that calendar was not just a table of dates, it was a sacred map aligned with the pulse of the cosmos. Every lunar cycle, every solstice, every equinox was recorded by him as a beat of the universe, and if you pay attention, you will notice that your life follows these rhythms too. Your body, your emotions, your inner processes, everything pulsates in tune with a greater time. And that is why Thoth was more than a god of time. He was the architect of order. Imagine this: the pharaohs, kings considered living gods, did not rule by power or inheritance alone. They had to be crowned by time. Thoth wrote their destiny. It was he who decided how long each pharaoh would live, how long he would reign, and even how long he would be remembered. The ruler's life was written into the annals of the universe by the hand of Thoth. And the most shocking thing, the simple act of him writing made it a reality. Can you imagine such power? For the ancient Egyptians, writing was not an ordinary act. Writing was a decree. It was activating reality with living symbols. And Thoth did not write on scrolls. He wrote in time itself, in the invisible space between the present moment and the next. That is why he was called the one who announces tomorrow. Because he did not foresee the future, he created it. He decided what would come, as if each new day could be born only after Thoth had given him permission, writing its name in the margins of time. But Thoth did not act alone. At his side always walked a silent yet absolute presence, Maat. And Maat was no ordinary goddess. She was the very embodiment of truth, justice, balance, and harmony. Everything Thoth wrote had to be in alignment with her, for the order of the cosmos cannot exist without justice, and justice cannot exist without harmony. While Thoth organized time, Maat held the scales, and together they kept the entire universe functioning like a symphony. If a planet went out of orbit, if a season came out of time, if a soul was lost, it was because the balance had been broken. And it was Thoth who restored that order. This alliance of writing and truth meant that the Egyptians saw the world as something deeply organized, not as a random chaos but as an intelligent organism. And if life is an organism, Thoth was its brain, its engineer, its planner, its spiritual programmer. But here is the most powerful detail of all. To the ancients, time was not external. Time lived within you. Yes, Thoth controlled the celestial cycles, but he also wrote in the book of the soul. The same force that organized the sky was the force that organized your personal history. He recorded your actions, your choices, your falls and your rises. He kept track of what you did with the present and wrote the consequences in what would come next. This changes everything. The master of language, when the word becomes magic. The Egyptians believed that the universe was created with the word, not with explosions, not with hands that shape matter, but with sound, with the verb. And it was Thoth who taught how to use that power. He was the master of language, not only because he created the sacred alphabet of hieroglyphics, but because he understood something that modern humanity has forgotten. Speaking is a magical act. Writing is a ritual. Every syllable carries an intention. Every sound vibrates in the invisible. And every sentence released into the world is like an arrow. Once spoken, it never comes back. When an Egyptian priest spoke the words of a sacred text, he was not simply reading. He was activating forces. The recitation was alive. It was like opening a portal between the visible and the invisible. That is why the rituals were performed with surgical precision. There was no improvisation, no distraction. The text had to be spoken exactly, with measured breathing, with awareness of what was being invoked, because it was not about belief. It was about energy, command, and manifestation. This was called the powerful word, a speech that brings power, that moves, transforms, heals, awakens. A speech that vibrates at the same frequency as truth. And when that happens, reality responds. Words in ancient Egypt were not just descriptive, they were performative. To speak was to do. And this is where Thoth reveals himself as something much greater than a scribe. He did not record the world, he programmed it. It was through him that humanity received the first written symbols, but not empty symbols, hieroglyphics, figures that contained more than sound. They contained essence. Each image carved in stone carried a consciousness. Each letter was a particle of a spell, a fragment of a sacred code. And Thoth taught this not only to the gods, but to men who were ready. He was the initiator of the sacred language, the one who translated the ineffable, who descended with the codes of creation and delivered them to those who were capable of respecting their power. That is why many ancient texts mention the so-called books of Thoth, legendary books full of hidden formulas, words of power, revelations about the secrets of the soul, of life and death. But here's a word of warning. For not everything that bears the name of Thoth bears his essence. In recent centuries, many modern texts have appeared that claim to be channeled messages or hidden discoveries attributed to him. Some claim to have found the emerald tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. Others write alleged books with cosmic teachings received during meditations. But the truth is clear. These writings, as fascinating as they are, have no verifiable origin in Egyptian tradition. The true records of Thoth are in the hieroglyphics preserved in the temples, in the recorded rituals, in the funerary texts such as the Book of Amduat or the Book of Coming Out into the Light of Day. They were not created to impress, they were created to transform, and they share a common thread, the sacredness of the word as a bridge between the worlds. Anyone who understands this realizes that language is not neutral. Every time you speak badly of yourself, every time you repeat negative phrases, every time you use the word to hurt, judge, belittle, you create a distorted reality around you. Because words carry energy, and Thoth knew this better than anyone. He is the force behind divine language, the guardian of communication between the human and the eternal. When you write with soul, when you speak with truth, when you silence the noise and choose words that uplift, it is Thoth who stands beside you. For in that moment your voice aligns with the sacred order, and that is how he lives on. And when the word becomes sacred silence, it is in silence that true healing begins. Because there is something that most people forget when they hear about the Egyptian gods. They were not just symbols or archetypes. They represented living forces within the human soul. And among all the myths of ancient Egypt, there is one that touches the heart of existence like no other, the myth of Osiris, Isis, and Horus. It is within this cosmic drama that Thoth reveals himself most profoundly, not as a spectator, but as the one who repairs, who heals, who sews what has been torn, the one who puts back in order what has been undone, who gives the soul the chance to begin again. It all begins with a tragedy. Seth, Osiris' brother, driven by envy and thirst for power, kills the just king and hides his body, tearing it open and scattering its fragments throughout Egypt. Isis, his faithful wife, then begins a journey of love and desperation to find every part of her husband's body. But alone, she would not have succeeded, and it is here that Thoth appears. He does not come with swords or vengeance. He brings another weapon, sacred knowledge, the wisdom that rebuilds what has been destroyed. With the precision of a spiritual surgeon, Thoth leads Isis in her search for the lost pieces of Osiris, and when she finally finds them, it is Thoth who does something never done before, the first mummification in history. But this was not just a funerary ritual, it was pure alchemy. It was the rebirth of the flesh through the power of the spirit. Thoth did not simply embalm Osiris, he prepared him for a new form of life, an existence beyond death. And from this union between the wisdom of Thoth and the love of Isis, Horus is born. The continuation, the legacy, the hope. But Horus, despite being the son of gods, is born fragile. Exiled in the swamps, hidden from the vengeful eyes of Seth, he falls ill, he bleeds, he risks dying, and it is Thoth who saves him again. With sacred chants, Heka formulas, precise gestures, Thoth heals the young god, stops his bleeding, restores his body. But most of all, it strengthens his soul, for Thoth's true power is not to heal physical wounds, it is to heal what lies behind them, it is to restore the inner strength of those who have been broken by grief. And this ability to regenerate manifests itself in a symbol that has survived through the ages, the Eye of Horus. That eye is not just a protective amulet, it represents something much deeper. In myth, during the battle between Horus and Seth, Horus's left eye is torn out. Immense pain, an irreparable loss. But Thoth, the repairer, comes to him and with his divine art recomposes the eye, restores its sight, its perception, its integrity. The restored eye then becomes the emblem of healing after the fall, of the light that returns after darkness, and of how no wound is permanent when the soul is ready to rebuild itself. Look at it carefully. The Eye of Horus does not represent an immaculate perfection. It represents an achieved perfection. The integrity that comes after everything has been lost has. It teaches us that true strength is not in never breaking. It is in knowing how to rebuild yourself with wisdom. The judge and scribe of death, what Thoth does with your soul after your last breath. And it is precisely because he knows how to rebuild the soul that Thoth also knows what to do with it when the body no longer breathes. The moment the last breath vanishes, the heart of ancient Egypt begins to beat at a different frequency. For them, death was not an end, it was a crossing, a portal. And crossing it did not simply mean going somewhere else, it meant being valued, being measured, being revealed, because in the face of the invisible, no one can hide. And in that sacred moment, Thoth presents himself once again. He does not arrive with a stern face, he does not shout, he does not condemn, but he is there, waiting, with his quill, his brush of light, and a scroll that is not made of papyrus, but of time, memory, and truth. The heart of the deceased is placed on a scale. On the other side rests a white feather, not just any feather. It is the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, harmony, universal balance. And in that moment, it does not matter what you said during your life. What matters is who you were. Your heart carries all your actions, your intentions, the words left unsaid, the choices made when no one was looking, the moments when you truly loved, the moments when you lied to yourself. There everything vibrates. and Thoth watches. He does not judge like an executioner. He records like a mirror. He is the one who writes the eternal destiny of the soul. But what few know is that Thoth can also intercede. If the soul is in despair, if it has tried, if, despite its defects, it has brought sincerity, longing, love, Thoth can act. He can speak. He can stand as a defender before the tribunal of the gods, as he once did for Horus. And here is a detail that changes the entire narrative. The Egyptians did not fear hell. They did not believe in eternal torture or endless punishment. Their greatest fear was being forgotten, annihilation. The soul that failed this judgment did not go to a place of suffering. It simply ceased to exist. It was devoured by an entity called Amit, and this, for an Egyptian, was the worst possible fate: to be lost, to disappear, to be erased from eternity. But if the heart was light, if the scales balanced with the feather, then Thoth smiled and wrote the name of the soul in the book of the justified. And this meant rebirth, continuation, immortality. It was the beginning of the journey through the Duat, the Egyptian afterlife, a world full of tests and symbols, of portals and guardians, of cosmic rivers and living stars. And to cross that world, the soul needed what Thoth had taught in life: words of power, sacred formulas, true knowledge. That is why he did not just judge. He prepared. He delivered the key words, the maps. He gave the soul something that no material possession could ever have: the ability to move forward. And it is still Thoth who is present in one of the most mysterious and profound rituals of Egypt: the ceremony of the opening of the mouth. It was at that moment that the priest, with specific instruments, touched the mouth of the mummy and pronounced words of reactivation. The goal: to restore the soul's ability to speak in the afterlife, to breathe, to feed itself, to speak before the gods. It was a ritual that awakened the spiritual senses, and the name behind the scenes, in the invisible layers, was Thoth. For without words, the soul could not pass through the gates. Without the right words, the portals would not open. Without a name, it would be forgotten. And Thoth knew that the name is what anchors the soul to the fabric of eternity. That is why, even in death, he continues to write, not just recording what has been, but announcing what may be. For death, for Thoth, is not the end of the story. It is merely a page gracefully turned by one who knows all the chapters. But not every crossing occurs in broad daylight. Some can only be accomplished in darkness. That is why Thoth is also called the god of the night, the guide of the unseen. He who knows the mysteries not because he has solved them with logic, but because he has contemplated them in the silence of darkness. When the sun disappears and the world sinks into shadow, it is the moon that takes the celestial throne. And in that moment, Thoth reveals his subtlest face, no longer the scribe of time or the judge of souls, but a mirror of that which cannot be seen with open eyes, a mirror of the emotional tides, of the inner phases, of the cycles that govern not only the body but the consciousness. For the ancient Egyptians, Thoth was not only associated with the moon, he was the very intelligence behind its dance in the sky, the silver sun, as they called him, a night sun, a calm presence that, though without heat, lit the way for those who dared to see beyond matter. And this was not a metaphor, it was a spiritual practice. That is why he also took the form of the baboon, not as a caricature, but as a living symbol of his lunar aspect. The baboon, a nocturnal and meditative animal, was observed during the hours when the world slept. Its connection to silence and lunar cycles made it the chosen animal to represent Thoth as lord of hidden rhythms. But why is all this important? Because the moon, for the Egyptians, was the wounded eye of Horus, an eye torn away by the violence of the world, but which slowly began to heal, phase after phase, waxing full, waning. Each lunar cycle was a reminder. All can be healed. All that has been lost can return. The moon does not need its own light to shine. It reflects. It mirrors. It shows that even what seems dull can still shine. Thoth is that principle. He who heals through the cycle, who restores through conscious repetition. He watches the moon shrink without panic because he knows it will return. And that lunar wisdom is not just for the sky. It is for the soul, for the body, for the emotions. That is why Thoth was also connected to medicine, but not to a crude, technical, disconnected medicine. He represented healing as reintegration, as natural rhythm, as listening to what is out of alignment. His medicine was not just for the body, it was for the soul that had lost its rhythm, for the heart that had forgotten how to beat in unison with the universe. And there is another detail that redraws this entire image. Thoth's lunar aspect also directly connects him to the energy of the hidden feminine. Not feminine as a gender, but as a universal principle. The receptive, the sensitive, the introspective, the mysterious. That which feels before understanding, that which listens before speaking, that which nourishes before acting. Thoth as divine thought and heart of the cosmos. While the moon quiets the external world, a whisper begins to echo within the soul. A whisper that comes not from outside but from the very center of the universe. And that center has a name, Thoth, because for the ancients, Thoth was not just one god among many. He was the thought of the cosmos itself, the intelligence that observes, organizes, understands, and shapes the invisible before anything can exist. Imagine for a moment that the universe is a body. If Ra is the sun, the source of life energy, then Thoth is the thinking heart, not an emotional heart, but a center of perception that feels the world as structure, as living mathematics, as pulsating wisdom. That is how the Egyptian priests saw him, not just as the creator of words, but as the one who perceives what has not yet been created. In the most ancient texts, Thoth is described as the one who gives birth to time, space, language, and proportion. He thinks, and the world happens. He observes, and chaos finds form. And before any myth, any star, or any god existed, there was already a silent presence that encompassed all that would be. That presence was Thoth. This image is not unique to Egypt. The Stoics called this force the Logos. The early Christian mystics also spoke of the Logos as the eternal word, the divine reason behind creation. And when they said, "In the beginning was the Word," they were saying exactly what the Egyptians already knew. In the beginning was Thoth. But this primordial Thoth was not an ibis-headed figure. He was a force, a metaphysical principle that perceives all and organizes its manifestation, a living consciousness, an archetype of pure wisdom. He does not simply think, he is thought itself. He is the gaze that understands, the mind that contemplates before creation. And from that contemplation, the cosmic egg is born. Yes, for the initiates, the universe did not begin with a random explosion. It began with a conscious gesture, a fertile thought that condensed into form. The cosmic egg was not a childish metaphor, but a symbolic image of the genesis of reality. At the center of that gesture was Thoth as the principle that generates the world, and at the same time, as a witness who understands it as it is born. But that consciousness did not remain isolated up there. It poured out onto the earth, and it is here, among stones and papyrus, that Thoth became a master. Not just any master, but an initiator. One who not only knows the mysteries, but transmits them with precision, with discretion, with intention. Because not all wisdom was meant to be revealed to the entire world. In every temple of Egypt there was a hidden space called the House of Life. There the most devout scribes copied, memorized, and interpreted texts from the most ancient traditions. These texts were not read like ordinary books. They were lived. They were doors. Every hieroglyph carried a code. Every corner of the temple a vibration. And behind it all the same name kept appearing, Thoth. The initiates who studied under his gaze were not just seeking information, they were seeking transformation. With every letter traced in black ink on the papyrus, it was believed that the same sacred word was being invoked. And this was not just belief, it was spiritual practice, every recitation an incantation. every silence between words a step toward the invisible. But beware, not everyone was ready, because Thoth did not teach the curious. He taught the consecrated, those willing to strip themselves of their certainties, to cross the veil, to die symbolically in the common world, and be reborn within the inner temple. The immortal legacy: Thoth, Hermes, Trismegistus, and the rebirth of wisdom. What if everything you understood about power was only the surface? For within the temple, in the silence between the sacred words, there was something even deeper, a secret that even the scribes did not dare mention lightly. They called it Heka, but make no mistake, it was not magic in the way the modern world understands it. Heka was the life force that flows through the universe, the living word that creates, the energy that sustains, transforms, and connects all. And no one mastered Heka like Thoth. The Egyptians did not see magic as a trick or a superstition. For them, Heka was one of the fundamental forces of creation, as important as time, as the sun itself. It was the power behind the word that transforms, the gesture that heals, the intention that pierces dimensions. And Thoth, more than anyone else, knew how to tap into that invisible current. Imagine a priest standing before a grieving body. The words he spoke were not eulogies. They were vibrational commands. When Thoth was invoked, it was not to ask for a divine favor, but to channel the very creative intelligence that helps the dead cross the threshold and continue their journey. In the rituals of the Book of the Dead, it was Thoth's subtle presence that made the crossing possible. For he was not just a scribe, he was the bearer of the correct frequency, and not just in death. Thoth used Heka to preserve life, restore order, protect the soul, heal imbalance. Heka did not need altars. All it took was the right word, spoken at the right time, with pure intention. And that, the sacred texts tell us, was enough to shift reality. It is no coincidence that Egyptian amulets were engraved with formulas in hieroglyphics. It was not decoration, it was activation. The stone alone did not protect. But once engraved with the right signs, each symbol carried a vibrational program. The eye of Horus, the Ankh, the feather of Maat, all tools of Heka. Magic was part of everyday life. At birth, at death, in healing, in transitions, Thoth was invoked for each. And the more the Egyptians understood this power, the more they realized that they were not just dealing with a god, they were dealing with the very bridge between the visible and the invisible. Thoth not only understood Heka, he was the embodiment of it, the perfect fusion of intention, sound, wisdom, and form. But time passed. Temples fell, Egypt changed. Yet Thoth did not disappear, for he was never a figure tied to a single religion or people. He was a living idea, a sacred presence that changed names and faces, but never his essence, and so he passed through the centuries, merging with other great names of wisdom. In the Greek world, he was called Hermes, and not just any Hermes, Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great, the supreme mind of alchemy, astrology, and true occult knowledge. This was not just religious fusion, it was recognition. The initiates knew that the same being who had taught the Egyptians the art of speech now spoke through the Hermetic texts. And when the Christian world sought to silence all that was pagan, that wisdom was transformed once again. In Jewish tradition, Thoth appears as Enoch, the one who walked with God and was taken to heaven without tasting death. In Islam, he appears as Idris, the prophet raised to the heavenly realm, master of writing and hidden knowledge. The same presence, different names appearing wherever there is a sincere search for wisdom. In the Middle Ages, when the world was sinking into dogma and punishment, the flame of Thoth was rekindled in the alchemists, in secret manuscripts, in the stars studied in silence, in codified formulas that did not speak of turning lead into gold, but the ego into light. And here his legacy re-emerges. Hermes Trismegistus, beacon of alchemists, astronomers, and philosophers, master of all those who dared to challenge the limits of the known. The foundations of true knowledge are not found in religions, but in Hermeticism. And where there is Hermeticism, there is Thoth. In the formulas of Paracelsus, in alchemical diagrams, in sacred geometries, in secret societies, his presence has always been tangible. It has never disappeared. It cannot disappear, because true gnosis is immortal, it adapts, but does not die. And before we say goodbye, reflect. If these words have awakened something in you, show it. A like, a comment with Veritas if you have grasped the hidden teaching, and subscribe to continue this journey. May your path be illuminated by eternal wisdom. See you soon.